he showed me in this boathouse all these Maple Leaf jerseys, banners, Stanley Cup banners that were all being used basically as drop cloths.
Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by DKI Canada. Across the street, across the country. He co-anchored a game-changing sports show and many others. Now he's written a book about his incredible experiences. Mark Hebscher, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show, coming out! Our guest today hails from Toronto. He went to Conestoga College, where he studied radio and TV. He started in radio and TV in Kitchener in the late 1970s. He worked in Niagara, Montreal, and Toronto as well. Hosted sports talk on CKEY. Hosted Global Sportsline for 11 years. Developed the Hebsy Awards, a radio play-by-play voice for the Leafs and Argos. Hosted Leafs games on TV. An anchor and host at CHCH. Two-time Gemini Award nominee as Canada's top sportscaster, host of the Hebsy on Sports podcast, and author now of Madness, The Rise and Ruin of Sports Media. Mark Hebsy Hebscher, welcome to the program, my friend.
Thank you, Joe, my friend. You're in the book too. One of the great stories I tell about going on the road is sometimes having to rub elbows with your competition. And back in the day, Joe, there was a lot of competition in Toronto sports media. It was tremendous, and it kept us on our toes.
Yeah, for sure. I just finished reading the book actually last night. Madness, The Rise and Ruin of Sports Media. Really enjoyed it. Lots of cool history, particularly sports radio and TV. Did you do all the research yourself?
I did it all myself. So it's sort of half biographical and half historical, I guess, because, I'm like you, Joe, I'm a sports historian. I like to know where things came from and that. And so I wanted to investigate the evolution of sports media, like the writers and then the radio, television, and then, of course, streaming and everything we've got today. And it's a pretty rich history. And the way we followed sports and the people that we read in the newspapers and magazines, and then the voices that we listened to, John Madden and Pat Summerall, Foster Hewitt, the list goes on and on, the influencers. And then, my personal experiences, covering sports. And as you know, sometimes when you're on the road, stuff happens that, you've just got to roll with the punches, and just the whole competition of getting the story, maybe getting a better story than your competitors, keeps you sharp, and also I think makes it's good for the audience out there. They've got a choice as to what they want to read, what they want to listen to, what they want to see. And then they choose their favorites. They used to watch you every night at 11:45 doing the sports. Perhaps they would flip back and forth between Sportsline and CFTO Sports. I know right. I would do stuff like that. And so, this is really good for sports fans, but also just to get an idea as to what the business was like and what direction it's headed in.
Yeah, I know. I would do the same thing. Like, let's see what Sportsnet's running at 11:30, and then Sportsline, I should say, is running at 11:30, and then look back to my stuff at or whoever's doing the anchoring for me when I wasn't working. But I do my own show. But it's amazing you remembered all this stuff. It was really incredible the memory that you have. Although I have to say that when I was reading, you put that altercation we had in Dunedin in a prominent position in the book, right near the top. And there was one small detail that was left out, and I'll refresh your memory about that now. Yeah, okay. So when we were in the Jays locker room, we were in there getting George Bell at his locker, and we were about to get the interview with him. He said, I have to get dressed here. And Fred Anderton, who had had a spat with George Bell at CHCH TV, asked me if I would hold his microphone because George wouldn't talk to him. So I started the interview with two mics. And when I held the two mics, George said, why have you got two mics? And I said, well, I'm just holding one for a friend. And he was about to do it, but you yelled from up top, 2 mics. Yeah, you can't have 2 mics. What's going on here? Because you didn't want to get scooped. And I understand that. But that was just a minor correction from what you had in the book. Otherwise, it was all very good stuff. And by the way, I remember a line from Jim Hunt right after that. He said, you were told by Hunt, he said, do you realize that Tilley comes from a long line of boxers? And you said, that's okay. I come from a long line of lawyers. So I thought that was a pretty good line. And
it was pretty good. And I think what it did, it goes to show you how competitive the business was. And it's not that way anymore. Now everyone kind of succeeds to the rights holder. So if it's a Rogers Sportsnet broadcast and the team is owned by Rogers and the announcers are being paid by Rogers, it's very different from the days when we're all looking for a story and you could ask a question that was controversial and the player or the coach or whatever had to answer that question. And now they don't have to answer those questions. In fact, the teams will likely say to any reporter that tries to dig a little too deeply, sorry, we're, no good, can't ask those anymore. And then eventually they may deny you access if you continue to try to point, not the negatives, but try to get the truth out of a story.
Yeah, and it's it was a different world back then. I mean, there was rights holders, and the rights holders were spread around for the different sports. And so, when you get into a medium scrum or whatever, you get some pretty hard hitting questions. And as you say, it's a different type of world. And sometimes the interviewee would get pissed off, and that sort of stuff happened all the time. I remember interviewing, I can't remember, one of the Jays pitchers, and he complained to Howie Starkman about the question I asked him. I said, Howie, these are questions that people want to know. I mean, if he doesn't like it, too bad. I mean, sure, we may have been a rights holder at that particular time, but we still needed to answer these questions. And I never ever felt that it was my duty to toe the company line. Certainly not as a reporter for CFTO, one of the CTV affiliates, even though at one point Bayton had the broadcasting rights. But it was always like, you try to get the story first. And the competition was fun, friendly, and it made it interesting and exciting. And sports fans were the better for it. Right. Were served better for it. Right. So let's talk about your first gig at CKFH. What happened and how'd you get there?
Well, CKFH at 1430 on the dial eventually became The Fan. And then they moved to 590 on the frequency. But when I was in college at Conestoga College in Kitchener, I was looking towards, what do I want to do? And I wanted to get into sports, but there weren't very many sports jobs available. And CKFH in Toronto, which was owned by Foster Hewitt, had the rights to the Maple Leafs games and the Toronto Blue Jays games, the brand new Toronto Blue Jays when I was in college. And so I felt that, I'll send a letter. And in those days, you would send a tape also, either a cassette tape or in my case, it was a reel-to-reel tape and with a nice accompanying letter. And you hope that whoever you sent it to would actually listen to it and maybe call and say, hi, come on in for an interview. That didn't work out for me. And I sent tapes all over the place. I sent them to CKFH, to Bob McCowan. I never heard back. And I figured, you know what? I know where Bob McCowan parks his car because in behind Maple Leaf Gardens on Wood Street was an underground parking garage. And that's where Foster Hewitt and that's where the people from the station would park their cars. So I stalked Bob McCowan. I waited for him to come out of the parking garage early one morning, startled the hell out of him and said, look, I've been sending you tapes. I've been sending you letters. I haven't heard back. I really would like a job. And I guess he thought, oh, who is this kid at 6 o'clock in the morning showing up here? And he said, okay, come back tomorrow morning and bring coffee. And I came the next day and I followed him around and he offered me a job as his producer. And I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. And that's how I got my foot in the door. And then eventually what happened was he said, okay, you're going to Maple Leaf Gardens and you're going to cover the Leafs. There's a press pass waiting for you. Stan Abodiak is the director of public relations and he'll look after you. And now I'm in Maple Leaf Gardens as a reporter, not that many years after, being a kid, just, oh my God, it's the Leafs, it's hockey. I was crazy about sports like any young kid. So that's how it started. I worked for Bob McCown. I produced his show. I got to talk to people like Muhammad Ali on the phone, and the early Blue Jays would come into the studio to do interviews. Pat Gillick was always there. I remember Sam Ewing, one of the early Blue Jays, was there, and he was chewing tobacco in the studio. And every time, Bob would ask him a question, he would spit the tobacco into a styrofoam cup, and then he'd give his answer, and then he'd spit again. So, that if it wasn't for Bob, it would have been a lot more difficult for me to get into the business. I think Bob saw me as sort of a little brother type of thing, someone he could mentor. And, I soaked it all up like a sponge. It was great. And we got to go to games, Blue Jay games, to cover the Blue Jays, the Leafs, any other stuff that might be going on. And I was officially part of the Toronto sports media then, and absolutely loved it.
Yeah, you talked about Bob extensively in the book, and we had him on the show as well. Of course, he founded Sportsline, which you later on would follow him there as well. He talked about how the show was an instant success. Let's roll that, Vic.
So we started Sportsline in 1981. I did from 11:30 to 12 o'clock every night, and we had nothing to fall back on. Nothing to look at and see what other people were doing. We had to make it up all by ourselves. So I think we did a pretty good job. We got a big audience. We had over 1 million people a night. And our advertising was full. The breweries competed against each other for sponsorship. So it worked out well.
Yeah, it worked out well.
Yeah.
And so Bob got the ball rolling, but then you came along with Tatti, and tell us how that transpired.
Yeah, so I watched the show from the very beginning. I thought it was terrific. People said, there's no way anyone's going to stay up and watch a half an hour of sports. And this was just before satellite technology became popular. So you would have the occasional show you could see on satellite, but it was expensive. Satellite time was very expensive. And, I stayed and watched. I watched that show every night. I got all the scores updated. Just before midnight, I would get all the West Coast scores and all that type of thing. I thought it was terrific. And then I was working in radio at the time doing a talk show on CKUY. And then after that, I was on the Blue Jays radio network. I was the first host of Baseball Today, which was the pregame show, the postgame show, all the updates during the game, which a lot of radio stations didn't have on their broadcasts. And, I sort of made a job for myself, created a position where I said, look, I'll come in, I'll do all the updates. If there's something going on in Detroit or Baltimore, we'll get the reporter on the air. We'll get them to tape a report, and we'll insert them into the ball games. And so that ended up working really well. And when I was there, I got a phone call from Ray Hurd, who was the vice president of news at Global TV. And he said, do you know Jim Tatti? And I said, sure. I know he had just gone over to Global recently. He said, well, we're thinking of putting you and Jim together to co-host this show that we have called Sportsline. I said, well, I know Sportsline. I watch it all the time. And then he basically said, well, we haven't come to an agreement with Bob, and we think you and Jim would be great together. Why don't you guys get together and talk about it, and let's see what we got. And there you go. It worked out beautifully. The timing was great. It was 11:30 every night, and it was wild. I mean, half the time we didn't know what we were doing because the highlights would come in, Joe, on the fly. So while you're on the air, somebody's whispering in your ear saying, okay, we got a goal from the Hartford Montreal game. And they would roll it in live, and Jim and I we'd have to figure it out. Who is that guy with the puck? And we didn't have much information on it. We would try to turn things around as quickly as possible. And nowadays, when we talk about real time, that's what we were trying to achieve then. We were trying to get as close to real time. Because as you know, back then, the sportscasts a lot of times would have highlights from the night before. Oh, here's what happened last night in Los Angeles that you didn't get to see, at 6 o'clock. And we were trying to get those highlights right off the satellite, right to the playback so that they can show them. So we can literally say, this happened a minute ago, or this just happened. And I think the viewers really appreciated that. Wow. So they would tune in a lot of times, I think, to see what we had from the West Coast or games that were in progress. And remember, a lot of these people had hockey pools or rotisserie leagues. So they needed to know who scored the goal, who got the assist. And they didn't want to wait for the newspaper the next morning to see the box scores or the summaries. So we provided a service that at that particular time did not exist.
Yeah, I remember when I first started at CFTO, they used to get we had the news feeds, ABC, NBC, and everything else, and we'd run highlights that were pre-packed by NBC, and they'd sign up, "I'm Michael Stone for NBC News."
Right.
And the guys would just run the whole highlight pack. And eventually what we decided it was not a good idea to do that. We'd take the highlights, take the video, and then put our own, just our own spin and do the voices live. But things had to evolve, right? So, in the book you talked about sweaty player interviews because you did some hockey, you did some Leafs broadcasts. And of course, Wayne Gretzky or Wayne Sweatzky, as you called him in the book, tripped all over you while you're situated in pretty much a closet, right? Tell us about that. Yeah.
When the beautiful thing about television is that it creates an illusion. And you don't want to fool the viewer, but you want to give the viewer the indication that you might be right in the middle of things. Maybe you're not. And so when you're doing a between periods interview, at the arena, you're in a makeshift studio, basically, with a couple of stools, one camera, a few Klieg lights, but it looks on television like it looks beautiful. Like people are going, there must be in a big, nice studio, but it's not. It's not like that at all. And when you're sitting that close to a guy who has just exerted himself, maybe for one period or two periods, and is sweating and is, maybe he just hit the post or missed a great opportunity or hasn't been playing well. And now you're interviewing this person live, and you can't ask him about, hey, how was it last summer when you went and visited Niagara Falls? No, you got to talk about the game and what we just saw in the previous 20 minutes of hockey. And that's not always an easy thing to do. A lot of times the player is like, he's sweating and he's tired and he knows he's got to go back into the locker room. Maybe the coach is going to yell at him or something. And it's the only sport, Joe, where you can talk to the players during the game. And I mean, when I say during the game, even if it's halftime of a football game, you can't talk to the players. You can talk to the coach, but you can't. Halftime of a basketball game, no, you can't talk to the players. But between periods of a hockey game, you could talk to the players. And so we would take advantage of that by having an intermission guest in the first intermission, which was the home team player. And then in the second intermission, it would be a player from the visiting team all the time. And then, of course, post-game, you would talk to the player of the game. So I was doing a lot of interviews, and all the time, these guys are sweating and they don't smell great. And as you know, the smell of hockey equipment and gloves and what the guy had for lunch, because he's sweating it out. Garlic, Brett Hull once had garlic, pickles, and a salami sandwich for lunch. I mean, he's this far from me, Joe. He's this far. And so Gretzky's quite the sweater. And as I'm talking to him, his, the sweat has fallen off of his nose and like onto the crotch of my pants. And I'm so close to him, for television purposes. You've got to be able to frame two people into one shot. Yeah. You can't move. So that's, I sort of started off by saying, just to give you an idea what it's like when you're interviewing a player for 4 minutes between periods in a hot studio and he's sweating all over you. This is one of the challenges you have. The other part is that if you're standing live and you're doing a live broadcast and here comes the hockey team right next to you coming out onto the ice, the TV producer wants it framed in such a way that there's Mark, there's the rink behind him, and here come the players right next to him. They're going onto the ice. Well, when Gretzky sees this, or he saw this with me, he would say, I'm going to get Hebscher here. Watch this. And he would walk past me and then slap me on the backside with the blade of his stick before going out onto the ice. But the audience never saw that because the shot was framed, from the chest up. Yeah. So they're going, why is Hebscher, why is he wincing like he got stung by a bee? And of course, they didn't know that I just got slapped by Wayne Gretzky on the backside with a stick.
Of course, one of the segments you were most renowned for were the Hebsies, and we have a clip from you introducing the Hebsies from the basement of the Hockey Hall of Fame. Let's roll that one.
Oh my!
In fact, here you'll find sticks, pucks, masks, pennants, trophies, Unbelievable stuff. But here at the Hockey Hall of Fame, we're not here to discuss hockey's glorious side or even hockey's historical side. No, today we're here to discuss hockey's offside.
Yeah, so nice intro to this latest collection, the Hebsies. Tell us about the segment, how it came about, and yeah.
Okay, so the Hebsy Awards started on radio, Joe. And when I was working in Montreal in 1980, I got a clip. There was a clip of a French play-by-play broadcaster. I don't know what town he was from, but in French, he swore into the microphone. That team had hit the post or whatever, and he swore. Right. And so that was one of the, and I sort of took that and we said, let's put that on the air. But there was another one where, and it was early on a Sunday morning, and I'm driving down in, and I hear one of the local radio stations, one of the young, I don't want to say interns, but a young broadcaster was doing the sports scores. And she's reading them out, saying, in the NHL last night, it was Montreal 6, the Rangers 2, Bostonio, Toronto nothing. I'm sorry, Boston 10, Toronto nothing. So just that little thing was like, oh my God, that was beautiful. She made a mistake. There wasn't a space between Boston and 10. It looked like Bostonio. And she read it Bostonio. And we've all seen this before on air, people making mistakes, that kind of thing. But I thought it was really funny. And I knew the engineer at the station, and I phoned him and I said, can you please save that tape for me? And that's sort of how the Hebsies began on radio, little announcer bloopers. But when I got to Global, I said, can we try this? But we do it with just, bloopers, since it's visual now, instead of the play-by-play guy or the newscaster, screwing up a score. Let's run it with, bloopers of players. And at the time, there was a guy named Warner Wolf who was on, he was on a station, I think in New York, WCBS.
WCBS, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he had a thing called, and I don't even know, but it was like a Plays of the Week type of a thing. And it was bloopers.
Right.
And this was in the early 80s. And it was on once a week. And it was funny. And he would do the voiceover, oh, that's crazy. And whatever it was. Yeah. And so I sort of stole that idea and said, let's do a weekly bloopers thing. And it was sponsored. As Bob mentioned in that clip, sponsorships, like nobody thought it was, the show is sponsored by, but for an individual segment to be sponsored was very rare. Later on, Coach's Corner was sponsored because, they could do a segment on their own and have a sponsor pay a fortune. Well, with the Hebsy Awards, I think it was Ford of Canada. They, our sales team said, well, Ford of Canada wants to sponsor the Hebsies every week. More money for them. It wasn't more money for us, but it was more money for them. And so since it was sponsored, now they could promote it and say, stay tuned for the Hebsy Awards, or here's a little thing. And it ended up being, taking off and being, I guess, my signature broadcast was the Hebsy Awards.
Yeah, I want to cover it. Yeah, it was a great segment, of course. We all had our own version. I mean, my excellent sports adventure was originally Bill and Joe and Bill and Joe's excellent sports, or Ted and Joe's excellent sports adventure, because Ted Fabro, our editor, came up with all these great sound effects and everything else, and we had a lot of fun with it. But, it was fun times. And you mentioned Harold Ballard in the book, and I think it's safe to say that he is, if not the worst owner in sports history, certainly among them. And you talked about the banners and the jerseys that you discovered. Share that story with me.
Sure. So I grew up a Maple Leafs fan. I grew up in Toronto, and I mean, they were my heroes: Frank Mahovlich, Dave Keon, Johnny Bauer, and of course, I got to meet all of these fellows when I got into the business. But when I was a kid, I didn't think the Leafs could do any wrong. I mean, I just thought that they were a great team. They must have had a great coach, the owner, everybody must have been just great. And so when I started in the business and I realized that wasn't the case, that the Gardens was run really poorly, and that Ballard wasn't such a great businessman, and he kept letting players go. He wouldn't pay them the money that they deserved. He thought the World Hockey Association was a joke and would never get off the ground. And so I sort of saw this happening before my own eyes. And then when I started working in the business, I realized how wrong I was. And how many fans out there who thought that the Maple Leafs were a great organization were misinformed. And so I didn't take it upon myself to educate them. But what I found was that things would happen that I just was aghast. And I asked about all the banners, the Stanley Cup banners, and the gondola, which I had been in before. I had worked for Foster Hewitt, and why it was taken down and burned, and what happened to all the Stanley Cup banners, and found out that he had taken them down when they were building private boxes up there so he could make more money. And he tore down the gondola and took down the Stanley Cup banners because he said that they got in the way of the view from the new private boxes, which was nonsense. They didn't get in the way at all. And then I found out, and it's in the book, about I happened to be at a wedding, and the son of Yolanda Ballard, she changed her name, was getting married, and he was married up at the old Ballard cottage, which Yolanda had gotten as part of, I guess the in his will, settlement, I guess he willed it to her, the settlement. And Bill McMillan says to me, I ought to show you something. He took me into the boathouse, and Harold Ballard was a big motorboat enthusiast. In fact, his trainer, Guy Kinnear, was actually just a motorboat mechanic, and ended up being the trainer of the Leafs. And so he showed me in this boathouse all these Maple Leaf jerseys, banners, Stanley Cup banners that were all being used basically as drop cloths, as rags, schmatas, I call them, in the propellers of outboard motors, and stained beyond recognition. And I just blew my mind. Like, you're kidding me. All these, they could have gone for millions of dollars. There was one jersey that was jersey number 10. It was a white Maple Leafs jersey. It was pre-1967 because I could tell with the logo. And it was game worn, which meant it had to be either George Armstrong or Sil Apps, right? Wow. And here it was in an Evinrude outboard motor in between the propellers, so that it was really sad. And I think that's when I went, oh my God, this organization is like the laughing stock of professional sports. And when people found this out, they just could not believe that someone who supposedly was the most diehard of all Leaf fans because he owned the team and cared about the tradition of the Toronto Maple Leafs would allow this to happen. Terrible.
Well, doing everything out of spite, putting people in positions that they're not qualified for. A boat mechanic is the head trainer, looking after the welfare of the players. Lack of class, lack of respect for history, and just general lack in class and all. He kind of, does he remind you of any current day politicians?
Joe, I don't even want to get into that. I just know that I just know that in those days he controlled everything that went on at the Gardens, and he controlled the media to the point where he would pick up the phone and call his favorite writers or favorite broadcasters, say, I got a story for you, and give it to them, right? And give the writer, for example, here's my take on what's going on. And the writers would dutifully write all this down and then publish it because it made their job so much easier. Imagine Joe getting a phone call from, the owner of the Jays, from Edward Rogers, and he's telling you everything. You can print this tomorrow. You can broadcast it tonight. I'm giving you the scoop. That's how he operated. He wanted to see his name in the paper. He wanted to have his name on radio and television. He wanted to be known as the guy. That's the owner of the Maple Leafs. There's your favorite team. There's the guy who owns the team in his bunker with King Clancy. And all the while, he's just ruining the team. He's ripping the guts out of the team. And many of the fans just didn't even know it. They just blindly okay, we love the Leafs. We always have. We're season ticket holders. Let's go. And it was a farce for many years.
Well, we all had our times of being banned from the Gardens. I remember one particular time I was talking about his lack of respect for women and everything else. And I called him Cro-Magnon man, and I was banned from the Gardens. And his lawyer called me because I'm sure he did. First of all, he wouldn't understand what I meant by Cro-Magnon man. It's K-band basically, but his lawyers called the station, and of course Douglas Bassett told him to go stuff himself. And Joe, of course, will be going down to the Maple Leaf Gardens as a reporter, and you're not going to keep him out of there. And it was nice to have that kind of support, but that kind of stuff. I know Fergie and Pat before me were always often banned from Maple Leaf Gardens, but didn't matter. They never went down there anyway. But still, You guys aren't coming down. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
We're watching.
Well, I talk
TV
about Dave
anyways.
Hodge in the book too, right? Hodge was,
right.
you know, I mean, anytime someone said something negative about the Maple Leafs, Ballard took it as a personal affront and ensured that that individual or the media operation that they worked for would be punished, would be denied access or whatever. He did it with the Globe and Mail. He did it with the greats, all of the greats. If you hadn't been banned from Maple Leaf Gardens, you were a nobody. And of course, you know, after a while, is like things don't work that way. The fans are going to understand that they need to have the media there to tell the truth, to expose something that needs to be exposed. And he pulled off stunts like he fired Roger Nielsen and he didn't have a replacement for him. And then he said to Nielsen, you come back with a paper bag over your head. Who would do such a thing?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Well, everything's the world revolved around him, a total narcissist, and you know, it was awful. And of course, he took everything personally because he was the problem. You know, it all starts at the top, and you know, he was the problem. So it was difficult for him to face that and accept that. And of course, he can try to ban people and whatever else he did, but at the end of the day, you know, everybody's still working, and we're all saying what we were going to say. You and Jim had a nice rapport on the air. Was it legit? Did you guys always get along?
No, we didn't always get along, but just like anybody that's involved in a relationship for, you know, it was 11 years that we were together, you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have days where, you know, maybe stuff was going on in your private life that, you know, maybe might have carried over into, you know, your job. But I can safely say this, that for the half hour we were on the air together, I think it was magic. And, you know, you put your differences aside and you work on what you have. I think ego has a lot to do with it as well, Joe. You know, maybe you think that the other guy was getting more airtime than you, or maybe something in the press, you know, maybe a newspaper article or something like that that talked about only one of us and not both of us. You know, so you're going to have that. You're going to have that sort of clash of egos and, you know, who gets the lead story tonight. And so we had to work that stuff out. But I think if you were to ask Jim the same thing, we had respect for each other. We knew that that together we had the best show on television, and we worked towards that end, putting together a show on the air. And if stuff was going on behind the scenes, the viewers should not know about it. It's that would be private between Jim and I. And as long as, listen, I'm sure Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, the Marx brothers, Abbott and Costello. I mean, any duo, you're going to have that. But as long as on the air, the viewer isn't aware of it and tunes you on every night and enjoys your work, then that's what it comes down to. And I think Jim and I worked it out. There were a few times where, we weren't happy with what the other one had been doing. But in the grand scheme of things, that was a very, very small percentage of the 11 years that we spent together. But there were some people, especially in the media, that loved to point that out, that wanted to point out the fact that, did you know that Jim and Mark don't get along? And that all the stuff we see on the air is all fake, and that they hate each other? Not true at all. Not true at all. They would cherry pick the couple of times that they heard that there might have been a disagreement between us. But we never went days without speaking to each other or anything like that. There might have been something that one of the guys said. The other one said, I don't like that. But you get over it, and you're working for a cause, and that is ensuring that the viewer is enjoying what you're doing, making sure that the sponsors are happy and continue to sponsor the show. And I think it worked out really well. And when it was time to go, it was time to go. 11 years is a long time. And, I stepped away. There were no hard feelings at all. Seen Jim many times since then, played golf with him a few years back. And he's a busy guy and I'm a busy guy. We don't live near each other. And people ask, do you still get along? You still see each other? Not that much. But when we do correspond, it's always, respectfully and, remember this happened and remember that happened. I would think Jim would say the same thing, that it worked out very, very well in the end.
I can see that Sammy, your cat, is in full agreement. I know. Yeah, he's saying yes. Actually, you mentioned that because Paul Patsko, our video guy, found some video of you and Tatti doing a little reunion here on the golf course a few years back.
Yeah,
that's just pretty cool. And What was this event about?
This wasn't an event. You know what this was? This was myself and Mitch Azaria, a very good friend of mine who worked at Global for many years.
Yeah, of course.
And Brian Salvatore, who I worked with at CHCH for 13 years and was a camera operator there and an editor there. And I think he's related to Jim. I think they're like long lost cousins or whatever. Anyway, the four of us got together. I said, come on, let's all get together and play golf. And we had a match, and Jim and I ended up winning the match. But it was, sort of like, we never had time to get together when we were working. When you spend 8 to 10 hours a day with a guy,
right.
The last thing you want to do is socialize with the guy. It's like, okay, I've had enough of you. And there's Mitch there. And we had our own families, growing families. And that's another thing too. You know this, Joe. You got a young family, and you got to balance family with work, with, your partner on air and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know who reached out to who, but I do know that it was, what, it's about time we got together in a social situation. And some of it was maybe to prove to ourselves and to other people that we got along. And we had a fantastic time. It was a hoot, an absolute hoot. And I wish we could do it again, but it's hard. Joe, you and I are trying to get together playing golf. We live fairly close to each other, and we still can't connect. But imagine if someone's lives an hour and a half, 2 hours away. You want to connect for a golf game or just even to get together for something. It's not an easy thing to do. But I would go if he called today and said, hey, let's get together for golf. Let's make a date for next year. I'd be in there, no problem. In fact, Joe, I was thinking of having a sportscasters golf tournament in the next couple of years. Getting, every sportscaster we know, getting Lance Brown, getting Jerry Dobson here from Ottawa, getting, me and Jim and you and think of all the sportscasters we know who all play golf.
Right. We that would be a blast. Do it. Do it. Yeah, make that. Hey, so did Jim or I ever tell you that I almost went to Global to do Sportsline? Did you ever hear that story?
No. Okay. Tell me.
Well, it obviously never transpired, but there was a time, a few years back, I'm going to say 2005, 2006 or something like that. And I wasn't really feeling the love from CTV at that particular time for whatever reason. And Gene Principe had just left. Right. And so there was an opening, and Tatti and I had a conversation, and it led to more conversations, and then we started talking money. Because, Tatti thought we'd be brilliant. Can you imagine? You turn on the Sportsline one night, and Tatti says, good evening, I'm Jim Tatti. Welcome to Sportsline. And then it flashes over to me, and I go, yeah, I'm Joe Tilley, and I'm here too. And he can pick up his converter, and try to click the converter to change the channel. What are you doing here? Trying to change the channel. It would have been brilliant. And it would have been fun.
Yeah, you guys would have been great together. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Jim was very easy to work with that way. He was very easy to work with that way. He'd hand you a line on a silver platter. He was a great improviser, great ad-libber, and it worked out. It did. And you know what, Joe? You would have had a great time on that show because it was pretty freewheeling for a half an hour. It was pretty wide open. And a lot of times it was, it was like, okay, we're going to drop this story because we got highlights from the Lakers or something would happen. And it would be like walking a tightrope. Okay, I don't know what we got here, but let's take a look. Oh, there's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dunking the ball. And I think the viewer kind of caught that too. It's sort of like, we don't know what to expect, but we can't, we have to watch. We have to watch the whole show. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we would have the answer to the trivia question, which was, we did that on purpose, of course. We need to have people watch the entire show, so you got to stick around for the answer. We would get calls the next day from people saying, I didn't stay up till midnight. What was the answer to the trivia? And Jim would always say, sorry about that. Sorry, you're going to have to tape the show or something. He wouldn't reveal it. If you called the next day, we wouldn't say, sorry, you missed the show. Sorry, that. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. So it came down to finances. I went to the accountant, and he looked at everything. The money was similar and everything else, but he said, you can't do it because you got to give what you've given up in your pension. And so you have to get this amount of money. When I went back to Jim with that, he said, I can't do it, Joe. I can't do it. So that's why it didn't happen. And then probably 6 or 8 months later, the show was canceled. They sacked the whole sports department at Global. They canceled Sportsline. So if I had gone over, it would have been that. And it was a sad time, man, because we knew a lot of people over there, and it was just Sportsline.
It was really tough.
That's it.
It was tough to watch that because after I left the show and I went into radio and I did I did some Argos play-by-play and Leafs stuff with Joe Bowen. I still watched the show. I watched it with Gene Principe and I watched it with Don Martin when he co-hosted it, and all that stuff. And when it happened, when they just aced the show, I think what they did was they came in and there was like a security guard that said to Jim, "You're going to have to leave." I think they ushered him out of the building. Mm-hmm. I've heard of stories about how people have, been let go. It happened to me at CHCH too. It was terrible. Yeah. But that to me was the end of an era. That was the end of an era because that show, they were basically saying there's no need to have a show on every night at 11:30 anymore. People are watching their sports in other ways. And so that's it. But they wiped the whole thing out. And then I think a short time later, they completely got rid of the entire sports department. Because there was some global sports for a little while after Jim left. And then I think they just sort of said, you know what? People are going to be watching the sports networks. They're going to watch TSN or Sportsnet. They're not going to watch us for sports. So let's just get rid of the whole thing. Terrible.
Similar thing at our CTV, of course, and we saw Lance Sunil and Claude and everybody else, go. And that was, really crappy the way that was handled. Fortunately for Lance and I, we were both able to, they offered us a package and they said, you can go now, or we can do this over a period of 6 weeks and allow you to say goodbye to your, coworkers and people at home and everything else. So that was the one bonus. And to be honest with you, when it happened for me, I was ready. I was ready to, call it a career anyway. So I think it was harder for Lance, but at the same time, it was like, it's just the way of the world, man. It's just the world has changed. Sports broadcasting has changed, and it's never ever going to be what it was, and the money's not there, And you went to CHCH because I wanted to run this little clip here. And you had some last-minute Christmas gift ideas that you were doing. Let's roll that.
I like to bring along a selection of beef jerky. Goes great with any Christmas turkey or goose or ham or whatever you're having. In fact, it's really good also with the Christmas cookies. My favorite, maple and brown sugar. You may prefer beef jerky tender chicken nuggets. Now, for some people, beef jerky might be a little bit too primitive a gift to bring, and I happen to agree. So maybe prepared foods like, a hamburger, or even better, surprise her with a submarine sandwich. And nothing, absolutely nothing says peace on earth, goodwill toward man more than Timbits. Merry Christmas. And if you're really stuck for a last-minute Christmas gift, well, there's always the value pack. You've got the ice salt, and of course, you've got the motor oil. Makes a perfect Christmas gift. And I should know because I've given out a lot of these before. And it really shows you how important Christmas is to some people. I'm Mark Hebscher. Merry Christmas. My shopping's done.
That was great.
I liked when I was at CHCH, I was doing some news stuff, Joe. And, when you're only doing sports and they go, there's a sports guy. There's times where you say, I know more than just sports. I can do other things. And so that was an opportunity there where they said, Mark, maybe just go out every day or every couple of days and just, find some offbeat kind of a story or whatever. It doesn't have to be a sports story. And, your creative juices get flowing. And it's like, it's not a sports story. It's something else. Oh, I can do that. I can do a little bit of comedy, or I can do, whatever. And it just happened to be Christmas time. And I thought, people are like, I don't know what to get someone for Christmas. So when you walk into these,
motor oil.
You get your gas, you walk in and you go, look at all this stuff here. There must be people who are filling up for gas going, I have nothing for my, I'm going to a party or I have nothing. What am I going to get? So that's what happened there. Ended up working out.
It's happened for sure. A lot of great memories. In the book you talked about, of course, Johnny Esaw, who you mentioned earlier, Don Chevrier. Did Chevy not have the greatest voice in the history of broadcasting?
Don Chevrier was, oh my God, he was great. When I first started in the business, I got a phone call, and as soon as I picked up the phone, that voice, I'm Mark, Don Chevrier. Just wanted to let you know, and he was praising me about something I had said on the air. I don't even remember what it was, but just the fact that Don, I'd never met him before, had phoned to say, really enjoying your sportscast or whatever it was. That was everything. And then I met him at a ball game. And then he hired me as a stringer because he was doing ABC radio on the weekends. He was doing these wraparound shows. And I think the show was called World of Sports. And he'd say, all right, let's go around the major leagues now. Let's go to Toronto. And Mark Hebscher is standing by, and the Blue Jays are playing the New York Yankees. And here's his report. And I would record like a 15 or 20 second report. Here we are at Exhibition Stadium. The Jays lead 2-1 on a home run by Otto Velez, blah, 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 whatever. Mark Hebscher reporting for ABC Sports. And he would run these. And so he hired me, and I got paid in U.S. funds, which was great. And so I would make more money from Don Chevrier as a freelancer, as a reporter for ABC Sports on the weekend than I would make my regular, salary for the radio station. So I thanked him for that. And also Don knew so many people. So I wanted to do an interview with Howard Cosell, and Don was like, well, I'll get him for you. I said, really? You can get Howard Cosell? He goes, really? I work with him. I do boxing matches with him. Well, so this was a great guy to have, because whenever I ran into a problem or I tried to get in touch with someone, I would phone Don. He said, here's my number at home. Call me anytime. I'd say, can you get me to so-and-so, or can I get, and he would always help. And if you don't have someone like that in your corner that, that's willing to help you become a better broadcaster or better at whatever you do, you're behind the eight ball. I was lucky that I had guys like Don and Johnny Esaw also, who heard me on radio and said, you're in the wrong business. You should be on television. Well, for a young man to do that. And then he says, have you ever done motocross before? Because I got something on CTV's Wide World of Sports would be perfect for you. And of course, I'm like, of course I know motocross. I knew nothing about motocross, Joe, nothing. Here's Johnny Esaw saying, you want to be on Wide World of Sports. Yeah. And so these are the types of people that heavily influenced me and I guess recognized my talents and wanted me to go further. And I'm forever thankful for them.
Yeah, and you had stories like Hockey Night in Canada. You talked about the Buffalo guys, Van Miller, Rick Azar, Ed Kilgore. As you mentioned, they were much bigger homers, and kind of we were. I don't know if we were allowed to be that big of homers or what it was, but on this side of the border, it was a little different, wasn't it?
It was, and that's a good question, Joe. I don't know when or if Canadian sports broadcasters ever rooted for the home team the way any other local. Buffalo broadcasters, they were announcing to a Buffalo audience. And announcers in Toronto, for example, that we saw on the CBC or CTV, a lot of them had network assignments. And so they couldn't be biased towards the home team the same way. They had to be more neutral because they might be talking to someone from Vancouver who's not a Maple Leafs fan, or someone in Montreal that's not a Maple Leafs fan. But when we heard them in Toronto, I thought anyway, that Bill Hewitt should be just as much of a homer for the Maple Leafs as Ted Darling or Rick Jeanneret were for the Buffalo Sabres, or as much as Van Miller was for the Buffalo Bills. But that's our broadcasters weren't that way. They weren't homers. They didn't want someone going, hey, you're not being objective. You're being biased towards one team, and you're not giving us a balanced broadcast. Whereas as a fan, I didn't care about a balanced broadcast. I wanted you to tell me about my favorite team.
If you said anything wrong about the Leafs, you were being anti-Toronto. You can't do that. It's anti-Toronto. Yeah, right. But it's just trying to be objective. Let's face it. I was a Leafs fan, Jays fan. Love the Argos, everything, of course, and it's so I was biased in a sense, but tried to keep it somewhat objective. There was, in the back of my mind, there was that. Today, I don't care. I care, obviously.
Right. I'm the same way. See, today I can root for my teams and not worry. I say, oh, geez, what if somebody says you're not being an objective observer and you're not being unbiased? I don't care about that. But at the time, Joe, and as you know, you had to be careful of that. I think one of the problems that Hockey Night in Canada had with George Strombolopoulos was he had come out already and said that he was a diehard Habs fan. He would walk around downtown Toronto wearing a Montreal Canadiens toque. And so if ever something came up that had to do with the Canadians, I think a lot of viewers said, wait a minute, that's George. He's an unabashed Habs fan. And you couldn't have that. Whereas Ron MacLean, nobody ever knew who Ron MacLean's favorite team was. No one ever knew Ron MacLean's political affiliation, for example. Nobody cared, right? Nowadays, though, when we look at broadcasters or athletes for that matter, a lot of us are like, well, wait a minute, isn't that guy a Trump supporter, or isn't that, like, who cares?
Yeah.
So back in the day, nobody cared about those things. Now people care about those things, or we look at someone and say, that's their political affiliation, and they're also a fan of that team. So how unbiased can they be? How objective can they be?
Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth, great broadcasters. Jerry always, of course, incredibly well prepared. Tom with a beautiful voice, and apparently he saved your job.
Oh, on a number of occasions. When you're a young broadcaster, and I'd said this before, you need to have somebody in your corner. You got to have someone there that's looking out for you, because you can't navigate the waters of sports media on your own when you're young. And Tom Cheek, from the very beginning, was on my side. He saw some potential there. It was raw. I mean, I was a kid. I was immature. I would say things, on the radio, for example, that, were probably cringeworthy. But I was trying to establish myself. Tom would take me aside sometimes and say, this is maybe not such a good idea, or try this. But where he really saved me was I was working in Niagara Falls in radio, and the Jays, I think, had just finished their first season. And then they do these winter caravans. And I never realized how hard Tom Cheek worked. I mean, he would host these caravans. They'd go to small towns all over Canada, and he'd have a couple of players with him or whatever. And he would introduce always to the locals, and here's so-and-so. He would do the interviews. And of course, the local media wanted to talk to Tom. What was it like? What do you think of the Jays this season? And I interviewed him one time in Niagara Falls on a freezing cold day. I got my tape recorder. I do a great interview with him. He thanks me. Off he goes to the bus because they're going off to another town. It's snowing out. I go to listen to the interview, and there's nothing on the tape. Joe, there's nothing. My microphone wasn't fully plugged into the cassette machine. I got nothing. And I run out to the parking lot, and I'm crying. I'm literally, please, Mr. Cheek, please. The tape didn't take, or whatever. I didn't plug my microphone in, and I'm begging him. And he's like, sure, no problem. And it's freezing cold. And he redoes the interview. Joe, he does an even better job the second time. He saves my rear end. Right. And then a couple of years later, he did the same thing where I had said some things that really got me into trouble. And he took me aside and he said, you can't do that. So he was a mentor, father figure. I called him the avuncular Tom Cheek, because very much like an uncle, that uncle that loves you and doesn't want to see you go, astray off the path. And Tom was like that. He watched out for me. And then eventually, I think when he saw my segment on Wide World of Sports with motocross racing, he said to me, what are you doing in radio? You got to be on TV. That was great. And for a young broadcaster to hear someone say that just makes you feel like $1 million. And Jerry was the same.
How we
Jerry
all
was
doing.
And Jerry was the same. Jerry came along. I mean, Jerry was, who is this guy that's sitting in with Tom Cheek? This guy that sort of sounds like Vince Scully. We don't know who he is. Nobody knew anything about Jerry. And let me tell you, Jerry worked harder than anybody. Like you said, I worked with Jerry in radio, and he said, show me how to pronounce these hockey names. He didn't know from hockey. And he didn't know that Yuri Sirha, C-R-H-A, was pronounced Sirha. It was like, he'd look at it and say, what's this? And he wanted to ensure that if he was going to broadcast a name, that was correctly, the pronunciation was correct. Nothing worse for a broadcaster than to mispronounce a name. Terrible. And so Jerry was terrific with me as well. Excellent. I worked with him for one season doing radio, and prince of a guy. And Jerry would never be caught without having done complete research, more research than you would ever need to do, because there would be a time, Joe, in the 10th inning or 13th inning or whatever, where the game was falling apart, where people might be losing interest. And Jerry would come out with these nuggets, beautiful nuggets that he would be saving for just that time to inform his audience, to entertain his audience that maybe weren't being entertained by the ball game, right? Like he'd probably want to say something. Okay, it's 9-0. You have my permission to go walk the dog. But before you do, let me tell you this great little story about Joey McLaughlin. And wow. And I learned so much from Jerry with that. And he did deep research, which Joe, I love that. Tell me something I don't know. That's what I always want from analysts. Tell me something. Don't tell me something I can see. Don't tell me that black thing is the puck and that red thing is the line. And when the black thing is over the red line, it's a goal. I know that. Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, Jerry's brilliant. He's been on the show as well. So you do it. There's a chapter on gambling. We're inundated with gambling and gaming today. It's like unbelievable. You can't watch a sporting event without being inundated with it. I know you're not a fan. Before we chat about that, we did a show on the effects of compulsive gambling. And Alan Carlup is a specialist in that area at Addiction Rehab Toronto. He talks about how deadly serious this affliction can be. Roll that.
Johnny's right. The highest suicide rate by far out of any substance or addiction or anything like that. Yeah, gambling by far is the highest suicide rate of them all. And yeah, like he said, it's and like you said, Joe, we follow into the gates of insanity and death. When money is the drug. John's right. Like it goes a lot, faster, quicker, harder, until the point where you basically leave yourself with nothing. And that feeling of emptiness, that void, the spiritual void is huge. Because it's like you put yourself in a spot where you don't know if you're ever going to come back from it, or you don't know if you're ever going to be able to, regain any sort of financial dependence or independence. And flexibility in your life. So it's a very scary, very, very scary disease for sure.
It's like, I suppose you could say that sports leagues and networks are really addicted to gambling as well, aren't they?
They are now, Joe. I think what happened was once the NBA reversed course, and this was I guess in around 2015 or 2016, the NBA had been the ones to stand up before Congress and say, we must stop the gambling in sports. We have to stop people from being able to make bets on sporting events. And then they did a turnaround a few years later where Adam Silver came out and he said, let's embrace sports gambling. Let's monitor it. Let's regulate it, but let's embrace it. And essentially, he was throwing up his hand saying, look, we can't stop it, so let's be partners with the gambling companies. And there is your high water mark right there. Since then, gambling companies from all over, and the reason was they didn't want people betting on offshore gambling, so they said, let's make it legal. And I think, I don't know the number, 38 states and every province of Canada has legalized sports gambling. And the big problem isn't so much that it's the gambling, it's the fact that you can make these prop bets or these other ridiculous bets that have nothing to do with, let's say, the outcome of the game at all. It's like, is it going to be a strike or is it going to be a ball? Is it going to be less than 95 miles an hour or more? The over-under on shots on goal, things like that. So what you've got now, you have people that aren't necessarily interested in sports, but the fact that while the game is on, they can gamble on a particular play or whether a guy gets a shot on goal or the number of penalty minutes. It opens it up to people that they think they're having fun. I wouldn't watch the game. I wouldn't watch a Vancouver-Edmonton game necessarily, but if it happens to be on television and I can make bets, why not? And this is the problem. It's pervasive, and the gambling companies know that they've got you. The biggest problem, though, is the players are of the age where, and your guest said this, it's young men. So all the players in all sports, and not just professional sports, but around the world, at some point are going to be approached or are going to have an opportunity to manipulate the score of the game, manipulate a play where they don't try their best, or something's going to happen, and eventually what's going to happen is the public is going to go, is this game on the level? Is this guy on the level? And once that happens, Joe, and once the fans, the viewers, don't think the game is on the up and up, then you've got a real problem. And that's where we're headed now. The question is, did he miss that field goal on purpose? And coaches are being asked, well, you've got a 10-point lead, but the spread is 11.5. Don't take your starters out. Leave them in there. And so it's a whole different environment now. And it's pretty scary when you think that people that make millions of dollars are still tempted to make a couple of grand by throwing a pitch in the dirt or by missing a rebound or missing a shot so that they get the under. on their 3-team parlay or their prop bet. It's ridiculous. Me, Joe, I like sports in its purest form. Two good teams or two good opponents going up against each other in a healthy competition by the rules. That to me is sports at its purest form. Anything other than that is not sport. It is something that could be manipulated, and it could be manipulated by a participant or by one of the officials, all of the officials. So everybody's under scrutiny now, and that's not the way it should be.
Yeah, well, it was Porter, the Raptors player, who pulled himself out of he pulled himself out of the game because he bet the under. And he had like the over-under for him was 10 points. So he went to the coach after the third quarter and said, you know what, I'm not feeling good. I don't think I should play the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Like that stuff happens,
he took himself out.
right?
Well, it happens more often, Joe. If you were playing in a game and someone said, all right, Joe Tilley's got the over-under is at 6 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. And I say, I'm going to bet the under on that because Joe looks like he's got a problem with his eye, or he's rubbing his eye. Maybe he's got an eye injury or something like that. Yeah. Maybe you don't have an eye injury, but maybe you rub your eye and say, I got to come out of the game, knowing that you haven't achieved your 6 points and your 5 rebounds or whatever. And anyone that bet the under is a big winner. Yeah. And so now they have tracking for that, saying that was very odd. But are you going to do that with every player? Do you know every single player and their friends and whether their friends are betting for them? Are you going to monitor every player's friend or associate to see if they went to the bank to pick up money or there was a drop-off with cash? Because that's what happened recently. That's how they found these guys like Chauncey Billups and some of the other ones, is they had their suspicions and the FBI started following them and surveilling them. And then eventually, after a long time, they put the pieces together and said, no, we've got this guy dead to rights. We've got him talking to this guy. We've got him taking money from that guy. He's done. And you think of some of the athletes out there that are so stupid that they're betting on apps where their IP address and their information can be found like that. Whereas Shohei Ohtani, he was smart enough, or his agent was smart enough, or his interpreter was smart enough to go through a bookmaker. Interpreter to go through a bookmaker so that nothing could be traced back to Shohei Ohtani at all. Yeah. So people are still doing it.
Except for he's making $500,000 bets, right? Where's an interpreter going to make $500,000 to bet on game?
Exactly.
Games, right?
But just the perception, Joe, that there might be some hanky-panky going on to manipulate the final score of a game, the result of a game, to me is just, you're going back to the Black Sox scandal when the Chicago White Sox threw the World Series. And it took a lot of investigative reporting and a couple of years before they nailed them down. But up until that point, everyone was like, oh, it's okay. It's sports. This happens all the time. Gamblers left it. Once the gamblers get into it, and now we're talking about organized crime with this story with Chauncey Billups and some of the other ones, now it's organized crime, and now you got a problem. Because if organized crime is manipulating the final score of sporting events, oh boy, you're in deep.
Yeah, and that horse is out of the barn, and there's nothing you can do about it now, I don't think. So the chapter on women in sports, broadcasting, playing, we've seen a boom. What are your thoughts on the PWHL?
I think it's great. I mean, I'm thrilled for them. My only issue is that are all the games going to be broadcast by women only? And is that going too far the other way? So it's almost like all the responses I hear or see towards the PWHL, for the most part, are women or parents that have daughters that are getting involved in sports. And I don't want it to go to the point where men who are fully qualified, let's say as broadcasters, maybe can't get a job, maybe can't get a gig doing those games because it's all women. That's my only concern. Have we gone too far the other way because of the fact that women were not allowed in press boxes or on sidelines or for any of those broadcasting jobs for so many years? Have we gone the other way? And not just women, maybe minorities as well. Are companies hiring people because based on their gender or their race or their nationality, as opposed to hiring the best person available for the job? And so if you're going to promote women's hockey and women's soccer, the NWSL just set a record, most viewers for their championship game, like well over 1 million viewers, which is tremendous. So is that going to equate to more jobs available in these sports and in the broadcast? And are those jobs going to go to the best candidate, or is it strictly for women? That's a concern. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy watching the games, but I would like this. I would like a good balance of reportage and of those calling the games and those in the media that are following these teams. And if it's just women following women's sports and only women, I don't think it's fair. How's that?
But it's not. It's not though. And you know what? They're selling out these games, and you look at if you look at the fans, there's tons. And I think that the more sports, period, being broadcast, more sports leagues forming, more more opportunities. Everybody, I believe, is going to get a better opportunity to get gigs. And I think ultimately the cream rises to the top. It almost always does. And it's a shame because we did have a backwards world many years ago where no women, no minorities, none of them got a chance to do anything at all. Now they do. So I think it's kind of like, maybe it's gone the other way a little bit too far, but at least they have the opportunity now. Everybody is. But I'm really interested to see how the Toronto Tempo are going to be received, because here's now the WNBA coming to Canada. And what are your thoughts?
You know what? I'm not a big fan of the WNBA yet, because Toronto doesn't have a team. There are no teams in Canada. And quite frankly, for the amount of coverage I see in the US on the networks anyway, I'm not sure who plays for who or what the teams are. I mean, at first it was just the nicknames. And so,
right.
I don't know. I don't know Chicago's team or who the Sky are or who the Liberty or New York.
Aces.
But, yeah. So the way that they're marketed in the States, if you're in the know, you're in the know. But I have a problem with that simply because when the Toronto team is established, the same way, I guess, when the Raptors started, you got to have names. You got to have names that people are familiar with. You got to have to breed hometown talent. It can't be Kia Nurse all the time. She's not going to play forever. And so I'm interested to see how they're accepted. And at the same time, I'm interested to see how the WNBA embraces Toronto, because they're the first franchise outside of the United States. And look, when the Montreal Expos came along in 1969, a lot of Americans were like, oh, Montreal, what do they know? What do the Canadians know about that? And we can say all we want about the success of the Raptors, and basketball was born here in Canada and all that stuff. But the bottom line is that when the WNBA comes, are people going to pay, to see them live? And are they going to establish themselves in the community? Because there's a lot of competition, Joe. I mean, not only you've got the Leafs, but you got the Marlies for hockey. And you've got, the Raptors.
OHL.
And you've got the OHL. And so there's a lot of choices for the sports entertainment dollar. And I'm wondering if, I don't know what the ticket prices are going to be like, but I'm wondering if there's enough room now for women's professional hockey in Toronto and women's professional basketball in Toronto and women's professional soccer that's going to be here as well. And so, for the new sportscasters out there, you're going to have to learn an awful lot about new leagues and teams and nicknames and players and salaries and their travel schedules and all that. Brand new, out of nowhere. Joe, if they would have said to you and me, by the way, guys, we know you're covering all the big sports, but this year you're now going to cover a brand new league, women's professional basketball, women's professional hockey, women's professional soccer. Off you go. So you're starting from scratch. That's going to be hard for some people. But for others who have been following these sports from the beginning, they're going to be the ones we're going to go to. I don't know. What do I know about the WNBA? I need to talk to somebody that's been following the WNBA. I need to catch up. I need to know what's going on. And not just Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. I need to know more if that team is going to establish itself in this market.
Speaking of hoops, the Raptors, 9-game win streak. Are you surprised by this team?
I am, but I'm surprised the same way I was surprised by the Blue Jays when they got out of their slump in, I guess it was June, Joe, before that, they were an okay team, not a bad team, whatever. But as Ernie Clement and Addison Barger and some of the, and then we saw what they were capable of. And so what I do is when I watch the Raptors and I see some of their players, they remind me of some of the Blue Jay guys. Like I didn't expect much from Ernie Clement and I didn't expect much from Addison Barger. And I see guys like that on the Raptors. Shed, for example. Like, this guy's great. Yeah. So, and the Georgian, I can't think of his name, Avshvili, Mamo, right?
Yeah.
So I see these guys.
Mamukashvili. Yeah.
I see these guys and I liken them to the guys on the Blue Jays that were filling roles that we didn't think much of, but contribute to the whole team aspect. Because to me, the Raptors are just like the Jays. They're using all of their players, right? If somebody gets hurt, they plug someone else in, next man up, and they seem to really enjoy each other's company. Which, you know, to some people like, sure, of course they're winning. Of course they're getting along. Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, that can do a lot of building for the future because even if they run into a slump and they lose 6 or 7 in a row, people can go back and say, yeah, but remember when they were winning 9 in a row? Remember how tight they were together? They can still do that. So I like them as a sleeper. I don't know if they're going to get to the NBA final, you know, like the Jays did to the World Series. But when you don't have high expectations of a team, and they exceed those expectations, you're like, whoa, now you can get excited. And I think that you can get excited about this team because, and I didn't know Brandon Ingram was this good. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And he's making players around him better. And that's exciting to watch.
Right. And they gave RJ a maintenance day and they still win. I mean, they just can't lose. Like it's, they're next man up, just like the Jays. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible run. So much fun to watch the Jays do what they did. Eh?
Oh, phenomenal. And what do they do next year? Well, they go out and get Dylan Cease. And of course, if you pay attention to social media, everybody who saw that contract went, oh my God, I can't believe they're spending that much. Number one, the Rogers group has more money than any other owner in baseball except for the Yankees. And they're number 2, by far over number 3. I think it was something in the neighborhood of $17 billion. If you've got $17 billion, what's $210 million to ensure your fan base that you are going to be knocking on the door next year, just like you were this year? You are not going to take a step backwards. You are going back to the World Series and you're going to win it this time. And the way you're going to win it is with better players. And if you can add Dylan Cease, who is the number 1 free agent pitcher on the market, and you're going to overpay him, so what? Because other free agents, Joe, like Bo Bichette, are going to go, if he's going to overpay Dylan Cease, then maybe I can get some dough as well. And I'm sure the Blue Jays would be more than happy to overpay Bo. Right. Because you're going to compare his salary with the salaries of similar players. And if you want that player, you're going to have to overpay. But it doesn't say, I don't think it bothers Rogers that much. I mean, $210 million, but people are squawking going, this is the worst contract ever. Let me tell you this right now. If Dylan Cease helps the Blue Jays win a World Series in season 1 and the next 6 seasons he pitches like a dog, it'll still be worth it.
Right. Was Kawhi Leonard worth it? Of course he was. Of course he was. 100%.
Yeah,
of course he would.
You got that champion. I said to you, if you went to any business owner and said, look, it's going to cost you more than you want, but you're going to be the best. Every business owner would say, let's do it. I need to taste that success. Because if I get that one taste of success, now I've got a fan base that is even bigger than before. Now, does that fan base expect a championship every year? Yeah, maybe, but that's okay. Yeah. That's all right. We can deal. And look, we dealt with the Raptors having a couple of really, down seasons after winning that championship in 2019. Guess what? They're back. Are they going to make the playoffs this year? Probably. Are they going to go further than they have before? We don't know. But the fact that they can bounce back from having a couple of mediocre seasons after being a championship team tells me that any other franchise can do the same thing if they've got good management.
Yeah, I think it's quite possible. Very, very, almost like really possible for them to make the Eastern Conference Finals.
Wouldn't that be great, Joe?
And maybe win it. Yeah. Detroit looking tough.
Wouldn't that be great, though? Yeah, for the Maple Leafs and the but let's say the Leafs see this going on, saying, we can't let this happen. We can't let the Blue Jays go to the World Series, and we can't let the Raptors go as far as they're going without putting up a fight. And so it puts pressure on the other sports franchises in this town to do better, or they're going to be the laughingstock. and people are going to ignore them.
Right.
Like last night, Joe, I watched more of the Raptor game than I did the Leaf game. It just so happens that they both won in dramatic fashion. But, you know, and it's a nice problem to have when you don't know which of the winning teams that you want to watch that night. Remember that time where the Jays, Raptors, and Leafs were all on at the same time?
Right.
Earlier this year. God. Remember, that was crazy. You're telling me there's a World Series game going on down the street from it again. Oh, my God, it was wild. Wild.
Yeah, insane. So what are your thoughts about the Leafs before I let you on? I'll ask you about that. What is your gut telling you about this team?
Here's what it tells me is that you're going to have to get great goaltending all year. Look at teams like Edmonton. They got problems. It's goaltending. So Joe Woll, what he did last night to win that game for the Leafs over Columbus. And it wasn't Austin Matthews, and it wasn't Nylander, and it wasn't Nyes that won that game. It was Joe Woll. He stood on his head, figuratively, and kept them in that game so they could score a late goal by Easton Cowan and then the winning goal by Nylander. So to me, if you've got a great goaltender, it makes the rest of the team better because they don't have to worry about the goalie. They don't have to look over their shoulder saying, I hope he can stop that puck. And when you've got a great goalie like that, it allows you to play your game. And I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen with this team, that they're going to ride the fact that Joe Woll is a heck of a goaltender, and it's going to make them a better team and allow them to play their game. Other than that, they lost Marner. I thought that was a mistake, even though he was just getting killed by social media and fans here for really, to me, no reason at all.
Which is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I just can't believe you gave away a 100-point player. You let him go for a 100-point player.
Well,
so they're going to have to find those points.
Yeah. I mean, we have.
But other than that, Joe,
right. Social media influencers saying things like, Marner's got to go. And what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking? Where do you get this from? I mean, you take 110 points away or whatever he's potentially can get. And how do you?
And I don't know how much the Leaf management pays attention to social media, maybe more than other managements, or listens to the Vox Populi and says, I guess the coach has got to go or we got to do something. But I mean, go back over the years and, when they fired all these coaches, they did it in like November, the Randy Carlyles of the world and some of the other ones. And people are like, oh my God, what if they fall under 500? The way I look at it is this: what if they make the playoffs and then go on a fantastic run and everybody's healthy? And they, because in past years they'd make the playoffs and it looked like everyone was dead tired or injured to the point where they couldn't do anything. So I'm okay with guys missing games during the regular season, meaningless, insignificant regular season games, to ensure that when the stretch drive comes and the playoffs come, they're healthy. And I use as the best example the Florida Panthers. They are not telling Sasha Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk to hurry back. They're saying, guys, take your time. Take as much time as you need because we're going to need you at 100% when the playoffs start. And that's what they did with Kawhi Leonard, the Raptors. They said to Kawhi Leonard, hey, you're not going to play back-to-back games, so we're going to need you for the playoffs. What does he do? He misses 22 regular season games, Joe, and he plays in all 24 playoff games, and they win the championship. So if that's a blueprint for success, ensuring that your top players get enough rest, then I'm all for it. Austin Matthews doesn't have to play 23 minutes a game. He can play 17 minutes a game, and he can have something left for the playoffs because that's what the Leafs need. They need a playoff run, and they need everybody to be healthy. And it hasn't been happening the last few years.
We got to have, the Leafs have to have Stolarz and Wall healthy. They've got to have Tanev healthy. They've got to have Matthews healthy. They've got to have Riley and all the Tavares, all these guys healthy. And if it, like you said, if it means taking some time off during the season, that's it. Well, we catch it for a long time here. Go finish your thought. I
was just going to say, does John Tavares not remind you of George Springer? What Springer did for the Jays? Yeah. Unexpectedly as the old guy. And now here's Tavares doing the same thing with the Leafs. You need players like that. Those are the character players. I think what Tavares can do, and I'm amazed, Joe, I've never seen in hockey a player been stripped of the C, that C for captaincy given to another player, and the original player stays with the team and contributes the way John Tavares has. That takes some kind of class to be able to do that, to take the C off and not feel ashamed and contribute to your team, maybe even more than when he was the captain. Tremendous.
Exactly. Rising to the occasion, incredibly. Yeah, Tavares is an anomaly, and man, the Leafs are lucky to have that guy. Where would they be without him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once again, it's your second book, actually, because the first one was Greatest Athlete You've Never Heard of, Canada's first Olympic gold medalist, George Orton, which you've got on your desk there. And great book. We've talked about that last time. Yeah. And, of course, this one, which is a new one. Madness.
And the audio book just came out too.
What's that? The audible book?
The audio book, just was released yesterday. Yeah.
Read by yourself and forward by Adnan and Vert. The forward is great too, but love the book. It's great. Go get it.
Thank you, Joe.
Go get it.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for being part of the book too, because a lot of people ask me about that. What was it like?
No, it was good times, man. Never be the same. All right, and you can follow Mark on Twitter and Instagram at HebsyMan. Facebook and YouTube is Mark Hebscher, and the website hebsyonsports.com.
Yeah.
And
I'm not doing that podcast anymore, Joe.
Okay.
I'm not doing the podcast anymore, but I do have a Substack, so you can find me on Substack. I'm doing some writing there.
Right.
And Joe, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. And we are going to play golf. I'm going to arrange a sportscaster golf tournament for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk to our friends over at Club Link and get that done, right? Okay. All right. So, when we come back, Stephen Brunt talks about living the dream, the golden age of sports coverage. In 1992, the best locally owned restoration companies came together with one goal: to make disaster recovery better for Canadians. And to this day, DKI remains one of the only 100% Canadian-owned disaster restoration groups in the market. Fire, flood, or storm damage. When things go wrong, the right help makes all the difference. With the right tools and local expertise, we handle everything from emergency response to full-scale restoration, getting homes and businesses back on track the right way. Because a home is more than four walls. A business is more than a building, and recovery is about more than repairs. When you choose DKI, you're choosing a company that's put Canada first since 1992. Locally owned, nationally backed, Canadian through and through. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center. Saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Hearing loss doesn't have to mean missing out. At Hear Canada, we help you take charge with a complimentary hearing assessment because confidence starts with clarity. Discover hearing aids, accessories, and expert care at your local hearing center. Not sure where to start? Our Hearing Health Guide has the basics for you or a loved one. It worked for us. Book your free assessment today at hearcanada.com. Conditions may apply. So, did you run into what kind of challenges did you run into along the way, either through the writing side of it or broadcasting side?
Well, I say it's a dream gig, right? Like I will say that, like the job, when I talk to guys who were part of that era, we had the best job in the world, like we were, I literally saw any sporting event you could name, again, all over the world, somebody else paying the freight, incredible experiences. There was a great kind of a collegial, thing among the sports writers. We were all kind of in the same boat. We traveled together. We hung out together. We went out after, games. We had dinner together. We were working on hard deadlines, which, when they did back in the day when it was about when the printing presses rolled, you had to you had to get your story in on time. And, the technology was not what it is now. Like I wasn't working on a typewriter, but I was working on, very early versions of laptop computers. And, the Globe had notoriously early deadlines. So you had to be a real, you had to be a real deadline guy. You had to be able to hammer out a column in 15 or 20 minutes sometimes. And, not knowing what the outcome of a game was going to be, that's, there's an art to that. And it was high stress. And, and then for a long part of my career, I was doing, at least working 2 jobs and doing some other stuff on the side. So, I was busy. I had a young family. My wife carried the freight a lot on the home front while I was traveling, going away to a World Cup for a month or an Olympics for, 3.5, 4 weeks. There wasn't just, a night here and a night there. But from my own point of view, man, I wish guys could live that life now. I try not to talk about it with young guys coming into the business because it's not like that anymore. And it's never going to be. But we had a sweet gig.
Discover the secret to timeless vitality at Renew Medical Center in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Our specialists unravel the science of aging, tailoring plans to defy its effects. Experience cutting-edge regenerative therapies such as stem cells and exosomes, addressing aging at its core.
It's a wonderful spot, and I highly recommend it for whatever you may need, whether you just want to feel better, you want to look better, have basically a quality of life, just to ramp it up a little bit as we age.
Liberate yourself from aging-related concerns, where accountability, technology, and passion for regenerative medicine converge. Begin your path to peak health and wellness with us. Schedule your appointment today at renewpv.com and elevate your quality of life.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Breaker, wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, check out our latest shows on YouTube. Yes, all of our past great shows, clips, and shorts are on there. Like and subscribe. It is free. Our socials, at Joe Tilley on Instagram and Threads. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show on Facebook. Thanks once again to Mark Hebscher for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. And let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com.